In our second part of our series, we're going to look at Napoleon, the military genius. Now, throughout this series, you're going to hear a ton about wars and battles. That's because Napoleon Bonaparte was most known for being a general, one of the most successful generals in all of history. Now, when you hear about any French campaign or any French battle during this series, be aware that Napoleon was with the troops. In fact, he was almost always with the troops. Even when he was emperor in charge of the domestic affairs of France, he still traveled to personally oversee every single battle within these campaigns. He didn't just lead from the back. Like his hero Alexander the Great, he was occasionally with a spear and was willing to put himself in front of the charge. There are tons of stories of battles where Napoleon is unhorsed because a cannonball blew him off of his horse as it went past, or just the fact that he was a really bad horseback rider and he fell off his horse. In one battle, 7 of his horses were shot out from underneath him. There's even a famous story where he picks up the flag and rallies his troops across a bridge with blood all over his face. Be aware that some of these stories are just propaganda. That bridge story did happen. He did have a bloody face, and his soldiers assumed he had been shot and wounded and was still waving the tripart-colored flag of France. Out, however, he was just bloody because he had a bunch of pimples and he had scratched them too much. True, Napoleon was a terrible horseman. It was also true that he won a ton of battles. He might not necessarily be known as a military genius. That's because he had one move. He was better at that move than anybody else for about 20 years. However, eventually his enemies figured out how to combat that move, his tactics. Napoleon began to lose, eventually being defeated for good in Waterloo. So, examine those tactics. First, he believed in an independent corps. The way military was set up is cavalry trained with cavalry, infantry trained with infantry, and artillery was kept separate. Nobody could understand these crazy people that wanted to blow things up. Napoleon mixed those together. Each corps had cavalry, infantry, and artillery within it. And these independent corps would march independently, within roughly 24 hours of each other, and they would all travel different routes. This was so the enemy could never know exactly where they were. And Napoleon used the second part of his tactic to surprise them. That's the mobility. He expected the French army to live off the land, which means they didn't carry any supplies or any supply trains, which slowed down militaries. By keeping all of your troops together, it inevitably slows down the process. That meant that French soldiers were oftentimes viewed as looters. However, this mobility allowed them to surprise the enemy quite a bit. This is the Battle of Waterloo. Now, at this point, the British had figured out his tactics, particularly the independent corps and mobility, and they were able to counter it. The blue marks are Napoleon's troops. There are 6 different regiments in here with a ton of different movements that happen. And so it's no longer stuff in the American Revolution where 2 sides get up and form up lines on a chosen ground and then shoot each other for a while before they eventually charge. Mobility and movement was huge. Oftentimes, Napoleon would have an organization form what he called a porcupine. The enemy would see them, see that there was an incredibly small amount of French soldiers, they would charge at them. The porcupine would be left to fend for themselves against the larger enemy, while other independent corps, unbeknownst to the enemy, would be sneaking up on the sides or even behind with its superior mobility. This allowed them to envelop and completely surround and defeat their opponents. On campaign in Italy, they once spent 5 days or 120 hours fighting 3 battles and marching 54 miles. That's an incredibly long 5 days. The looting was not just money. In Italy, priceless works of art, like the Wedding Feast, were stolen, in addition to work by Raphael, Michelangelo, and some of the other world's greatest artists. Third part of his tactics was always artillery. This is where Napoleon learned in school, and this was what he was trained at specifically. He believed that God was always on the side of the larger masses, particularly who had heavier firepower as far as cannons go. While guns are a big deal at this point in time, the average shooter in each of these armies was pretty bad. Hand to hand fighting with bayonets is still going to be pretty common. However, the cannons are extremely accurate at this point in time, and Napoleon is the quickest to take advantage and utilize them. Oftentimes, he would create gaps to split the enemy. He would fire into one section instead of spreading out his artillery fire, force soldiers away from each other. Then he would insert his troops with that superior mobility into that gap, while the other independent corps were coming around from the sides. Lastly, he looked to reinforce success, not failure. Every single general during this time would wait to push in the reinforcements. They would keep those reinforcements until they saw where they were having trouble, and they would send them in so that the original plan did not break. Napoleon had a totally different viewpoint on this. He said if those troops are losing, there's probably a reason that they're losing, and I don't want to waste more men there if they're going to lose too. So instead, he would look to see where he's the most successful and the enemy is the most weakest. He would send his reinforcements toward that success, finish up that area, and then turn the entire army to wherever the porcupine or the pincushion was getting bogged down. Ultimately, if you were failing, you couldn't expect reinforcements. If you were succeeding, they were right around the corner. These five tactics made him one of the most successful generals throughout history, and they're pretty simple concepts. Mix your military into independent corps, make them mobile, able to live off land and move fast, involve heavy artillery, big guns, split your enemy by creating gaps, and reinforce success, not failure.